Hi guys, it's me ChazzaHD and welcome to this weekend preview for the return of the next race in the Formula 1 calendar, the return of Formula 1 in 2023. The summer break is now over and we've got 10 races to go this season. And yeah, this weekend we're racing at Zandvoort in Holland for the 2023 Dutch Grand Prix. Let's hope it can be an exciting weekend. I'll be honest, going into the weekend, I'm excited to a certain extent about certain things this weekend, but I'm not massively pumped for this weekend's race because, when it comes to qualifying, I'm sure we'll get, some excitement there. Qualifying this season has been very, very exciting. But for the race on Sunday, I'm not expecting a great deal, or really that much at all. So, yeah, it's not going to be, or definitely going into the weekend, I'm not expecting anything special this weekend in terms of a thrilling weekend. Again, qualifying is going to be the most exciting part of the weekend, where, of course, with it being such a short lap, the gaps will be quite small between a lot of the certain teams, certain drivers, so that'll make things very interesting, and maybe we'll get a couple surprises along the way as well. But yeah, not expecting this weekend to be, again, the most exciting Grand Prix weekend. There are some other tracks remaining on the calendar for this season that I think have a pretty good chance of producing, say, a good race at least, never mind a great one. But unfortunately, this track isn't one of them. Again, it's a track that's going to be more exciting when it comes to qualifying rather than the race, because it is very hard to overtake around here. Saying that, last year's race was exciting, but not necessarily because of overtaking. It was just really, I'd say, interesting last year's race at Zandvoort, where we had a proper fight for victory between two different teams, Red Bull and Mercedes, and it was looking close for a lot of that Grand Prix. In the end, of course, Red Bull got the job done, but it was a very interesting race, and that's what made it feel like it was a good race in the end, even though we didn't get, again, a ton of overtaking. We did get quite a bit after the safety car that came out like 15 laps from the end, but that's probably at best what you're going to get this weekend is an interesting race, but again, still not a lot of overtaking. But let's hope I'm wrong. You guys might remember a few months ago, going into the Miami Grand Prix, I was talking about how, losing my love for Formula 1 and all of that. And then we ended up having a much better Miami Grand Prix than I thought was possible. So maybe I will be wrong. But yeah, hope you guys are doing well. Of course, I haven't seen a lot of you since last Grand Prix. Maybe I haven't seen you since the last stream I did, which was last Sunday. By the way, if you want to check out a couple pieces of content I did do during the summer break, such as my mid-season review and my rest of season preview, essentially, that I did last Sunday, then make sure to go and check those out. A link below in the description for those two pieces of content. I also did a driver lineup analysis for 2024, which was I went live with that piece of content on the 14th of August, I think it was. Smack bang in the middle of those two other streams. So, again, if you want to check that out, make sure to do so. But, yeah, hello to all you guys. Hope you're doing well. And, again, as usual, no matter what time zone you're in, what part of the world you're from, hope you're all having as best a Thursday, or a Friday even, as possible. But yeah, let's get into this preview. What we're going to go through is the usual stuff, looking at the map of the track, getting into the individual sectors and what teams in those sectors you can expect to be quick or not so quick. Obviously, I'll get into my initial qualifying and race predictions going into the weekend based off of just how things are at the minute and how I think things will play out. Of course, I'm not going to be totally correct. And then we'll go through the teams one by one, and I'll get a bit more in depth as to how I think their weekend will go. Can't really talk about upgrades tonight because, I mean, there isn't really anything to talk about. The only thing we've heard about, upgrades-wise, is that Mercedes, McLaren, and Aston Martin are bringing upgrades this weekend. Have no idea how big those upgrades are. Hopefully, they are quite big. Ferrari, though, from what I've heard, are not bringing anything this weekend, which is, to me, quite surprising. I think their plan of development for the rest of the year, they did basically brief the media on it a week or two ago, that their next upgrade is probably going to be Singapore or Japan, which, I mean, if it works, great, but I would have expected it to come for this race weekend because they're effectively giving up extra performance. You know, this race and the Italian Grand Prix next weekend. Of course, Monza is a very low downforce circuit, but still, if it can give extra performance, then, you know, that's time on the table that Ferrari are leaving. But yeah, in terms of upgrades, that's all I've heard. I'm not going to know at all. Or we're not going to know at all officially who has brought what and the size of each team's upgrades until tomorrow when the official list comes out. Another team as well that I have heard about upgrades wise for this weekend is the Haas F1 team. This weekend should be their last big upgrade of the season, and their upgrade, I think, might be, is it a suspension or a wheel upgrade? I can't remember exactly, but the upgrade itself is supposed to not totally fix, but, you know, noticeably improve on their tyre wear issues. That's what the upgrade is aimed at, we believe. So we'll see what that upgrade officially is tomorrow. But yeah, we'll get into that in the qualifying preview, of course, tomorrow night. That I'll be doing, by the way, at 6:30 p.m. UK time. A bit earlier tomorrow because the team I support, Chelsea, football team I support, are playing at 8 p.m. So that's why I'm going live a bit earlier than usual. Anyway, let's get into this stream. But before we go into anything, let's just have a reminder of the championship standings coming into this weekend's Dutch Grand Prix. Max Verstappen is 125 points clear of Sergio Perez. He's not far away from Verstappen from officially winning his third world title. Probably going to be in Qatar or maybe even at the US Grand Prix in Texas, where he officially wraps it up. The month of October, I'm 95% sure is the month it'll be where he'll get it wrapped up. There is still, though, I think, a chance that he could get it done in September, but it would require Sergio Perez and Alonso and Hamilton as well just having, you know, really bad races and just barely scoring points. And Verstappen obviously would have to keep his winning streak going, I think, for that to be realistic. But yeah, most likely it'll be the Qatar or the US Grand Prix in October where he gets that done. Perez in second, 40 points clear of Fernando Alonso in third, who has done remarkably well to stay in third place after how the Aston Martin pace has completely dropped. Lewis Hamilton is in fourth, with Charles Leclerc in fifth, and then George Russell in sixth, Carlos Sainz in P7, Lando Norris in 8th, Lance Stroll 9th, and Esteban Ocon in 10th. Very close fight between Leclerc, Russell, Sainz, and soon to be Lando Norris over best of the rest, really, in the championship, which is P5. Yeah, be interesting to see who wins out on that. Leclerc, up to 5th. I'm pretty sure that is the highest he's been in this year's championship. I think even once he got that podium in Baku, I don't think he got up to 5th or anything. Might be wrong, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the highest he's been at any point in 2023. So good to see. And to be fair, he's not that far away from Alonso and Hamilton, only 50 points away, considering how his season has been, you know, really all over the place for the Monegasque. And then on the constructors' side, Red Bull are just over 250 points clear of Mercedes. Mercedes, you'd think, have secured second in the championship as they are 50 points clear, 51 points clear actually, of Aston Martin, who are in P3. And then you've got Ferrari fourth, only 5 points behind the Aston Martin team. Really, the only reason Aston Martin went into the summer break in third is because of an amazing result by the team at Spa, where they finished 5th and 9th. A result that nobody, I think, really expected them to get. Ferrari obviously ended up on the podium with Leclerc. Sainz retired from the race, so Ferrari could have got more points at Spa, but even with that, I think Aston Martin really put in a superb performance to secure third going into the summer break. But it is going to be very hard, I think, for Aston Martin to finish in third, given pace-wise where they currently are. And then, Ferrari fourth, McLaren in fifth. McLaren, 93 points behind Aston Martin. Sounds a lot, but with 10 races to go, and given the amount of points we have on offer for each race, and plus we've still got 3 sprint races left in Qatar, Texas, and Sao Paulo, McLaren absolutely can finish in third. I don't think there's any doubt about that, especially with having the stronger driver lineup of those 3 teams. Alpine have pretty much secured for this season 6th place, which of course is very disappointing for them given what last season was like. And then Williams in P7, level on points of Haas in 8th, Alfa Romeo 9th, and AlphaTauri in P10. We'll see if the constructors' standings after this weekend change. Most likely, it'll be Ferrari overtaking Aston Martin, but of course, that is not a guarantee. But now let's look at the track itself, and it is a short track. It is one of the shortest, I think, on the calendar, and it is a fun track. It is similar, actually, to the Hungaroring that we recently were at, 5-6 weeks ago. Tight and twisty. A lot of the corners are quite, fun to drive through for the corners. Some unique corners as well, such as turn 3, where it's very banked, and as well, of course, the banking through turn 13, 14, and to the start-finish line. So it is a very unique track, and of course the location, right next to the beach in Holland, very unique as well. And with the atmosphere, of course, that is always at this Grand Prix because of Max Verstappen being on the grid, it is, it really does separate itself from a lot of races on the calendar. The red line, of course, is the first sector. The blue line is the middle sector. The yellow line is the final sector. Now, this track, it is a high aero track, but it's not as high aero as people think it is. Because the first sector, you're flat out into turn 1, and then you get back on the throttle after of course, turn 1, which is basically like a hairpin type corner. And then you're pretty much flat through, well, maybe not flat, but, slight lift through turn 2. Then you brake into turn 3. Then when you come out of turn 3, you are flat out until, turn 7, turn 8? So, it's especially, especially for the first half of the lap. It's not as high aero as you think. It is actually quite flat out, certain parts of this circuit. But once you get into the real meat of the middle sector, that's when the corners really start to come at you thick and fast. Turn 8, turn 9, turn 10, very important corners. Then you have a short DRS zone, which is meaningless, really. And then it takes you to turn 11 and turn 12, which is basically like a slow chicane, and it is quite pedestrian, that part of the track. And then a short run into turn 13, which is just a 90-degree right-hander, and then through the flat-out banking through 13 and, or not 13, turn 14 rather. And then you're onto the start-finish line and flat out towards turn 1. So, again, it's a high aero track because, you do have a lot of corners here that are so critical to your overall performance, but it is also quite high speed in certain parts. Again, the first half of the lap is very high speed, and the second half of the lap, you do have a lot of important corners, but, the end to the lap is absolutely flat out. So it's not quite, similar to the Hungaroring in all facets. Again, certain parts of this circuit are similar. Certain parts are not really at all. And again, even if you compare it, say, to the Circuit de Catalunya, certain parts are similar, certain parts are absolutely not. I just want to clarify that. But downforce is the most important thing for this circuit because of how important those corners are, really from turn 7 all the way to turn 13. And let's go through each sector and who in what sector I believe will be the teams to look out for. So in the first sector, I've decided to compare it to the first sector at the Hungaroring, because it is quite similar through there. Because with the Hungaroring, you've got in the first sector there, a couple long, acceleration zones, and then a couple, say, slowish corners. Pretty much similar to the first sector at Zandvoort, and in that first sector in Hungary, Red Bull were just about the quickest team, from Mercedes second. Alfa Romeo were very quick. I am expecting Alfa Romeo to be a bit stronger this weekend than they were at Spa, and if there is any team that is going to be a surprise package, it will be them. So watch out for Alfa Romeo, because around higher aero tracks, they've always tended this season to be a bit stronger. Ferrari were not performing that great. McLaren, even in that first sector, weren't that terrific either. Aston Martin, of course, were pretty slow in comparison to the teams they are, considering rivals at the moment. Haas were not looking that bad. And then, because in Hungary in qualifying we had the tyre allocation rule, Alpine and AlphaTauri, they did their best first sector time on mediums, and Williams did their best first sector on the hard compound tyre. So through the first sector here at Zandvoort, Red Bull should be the best team really through all of the sectors. Mercedes, you'd think, would be second best team, because not only do they have good levels of downforce, but compared to McLaren, obviously fellow Mercedes-powered team, and Aston Martin, Mercedes do have a bit stronger of a straight line speed, which will help in that first sector, and even in the final sector to a degree as well. And then, Alfa Romeo, really around all of the lap, I expect to be strong, not maybe super strong, maybe not strong enough to get into the top 10, but outside of the top 10, I would expect them to be, right there with teams like Alpine for sure, given how strong they were back in Hungary. And then, Ferrari, I'm not expecting them really to be super quick this weekend, as I'll get on to in a moment. And for McLaren, as we saw in the first sector in Hungary, wasn't that great of a sector for them, but obviously got stronger in other parts of the lap. Similar it will be here at Zandvoort, but again, not all of Zandvoort. The Zandvoort track is similar to the Hungaroring. Now, for the middle sector, if I just go back to the track map, again, that's the most critical part of the lap in terms of the corners. I've decided to compare the middle sector here in Zandvoort to the final sector in Hungary, because the final sector in Hungary, you've got 3 corners. The final corner is a medium speed corner where actually on the exit you are going quite quickly, and you can be very aggressive through that final corner. But you also do have a couple medium speed, slow speed corners like you have here in the middle sector at Zandvoort, such as turn 9 and turn 10, which can be, again, at times a bit pedestrian. If we go back to the sector times, from the final sector times in Hungary, Red Bull, again, the quickest team. Mercedes were looking good as well. McLaren, a bit further behind Mercedes they were back in Hungary through that sector. And I will say with McLaren, I don't expect them to be as strong this weekend as people are hyping them up to be. I think they'll probably be on the podium, as I'll get to on in a moment with my initial predictions. But I have seen a lot of people, people overhyping them coming into this weekend, talking about McLaren are going to be easily the second best team, which I really disagree with, to be honest. McLaren, they'll be good. Don't get me wrong, they will be good, but they're not going to be like they were at Silverstone, second and third on the grid. I think that would be quite surprising if they were that good. Aston Martin were a bit stronger through that sector, and really here at Zandvoort, you would expect Aston Martin to be at their best in the middle sector. Haas were not looking too bad. Alfa Romeo dropped off a bit. Ferrari were really terrible, and for Ferrari, because of their strengths and weaknesses with their car, the middle sector is where they'll be at their worst. And then AlphaTauri, compared to Alpine on the similar medium compound in Hungary, we're doing a pretty decent pace. AlphaTauri definitely will be better hooked up to this track in the dry than they were at Spa. Even though at Spa they did finish in the points, the whole weekend in the dry, they weren't necessarily at times looking that quick. And then Alpine, overall, I just don't think Alpine are going to have that good of a weekend, to be honest. And Williams, once again, were slowest. And I think Williams this weekend will probably be the slowest team. And if we go back to the track map once again, the final sector, again, you've got turn 11, turn 12, pretty much a chicane, and then a 90-degree right-hander, and then you're flat out through turn 14 and 2 start-finish line. I've decided to compare the final sector here at Zandvoort to the final sector at Silverstone, which is the most similar I could find sector-wise from any track we've been to recently. Obviously, don't want to go too far back into early into the season, because of course there's been lots of upgrades to these cars which have really changed the pecking order around. But in that final sector at Silverstone, Max Verstappen was a 10th quicker than Lando Norris, and Red Bull are clearly going to be quicker than the McLaren, Mercedes, and Ferrari, Aston Martin teams this weekend. No doubt about it. Qualifying or race conditions doesn't matter. McLaren, though, were quite a bit stronger in that sector 3 than Mercedes by half a tenth, and pretty much half a tenth quicker, or just over half a tenth quicker rather, than Ferrari. Aston Martin were not looking very smart at all through that final sector. Alpine were a bit better. Williams, of course, that entire weekend were very quick. Haas, Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri, the reason they were so slow is because in qualifying at Silverstone, they ran or they did their running during the, when the track conditions weren't at their best. And also, they didn't have access to the DRS like other teams had in other parts of qualifying. So that's why their sector times are, quite far off in that final sector. But overall, for the entire track, if I go back for the track map, again, Red Bull, pretty confident they'll be the best team. Probably with around a half a second gap to Mercedes, at least in qualifying. In the race, Red Bull will probably show at times that they have probably 7 or 8 tenths of a second in their pocket. Of course, we know their car is stronger in the race than it is in qualifying. So yeah, Red Bull will dominate this weekend. Mercedes, I think, will be the second best team, with McLaren third. Aston Martin, I think, will be the 4th quickest team in the race, but they won't be as quick as Ferrari in qualifying. It will be close between those two teams in particular all weekend. But yeah, in the race, I think Aston Martin will be a tad quicker than Ferrari. Then yeah, Ferrari 5th, and then Alfa Romeo I've put in 6th, with Alpine in 7th, Haas 8th, AlphaTauri 9th, Williams in 10th. That is my pecking order for this weekend. Again, just to clarify with Ferrari and Aston Martin, I think Aston Martin will be quicker than Ferrari in the race, but in qualifying, it'll be the other way round. But let's get into my top 10 qualifying and race predictions coming to the weekend. Of course, these predictions are not final, but let's get into them anyway. So I think Max Verstappen will take pole position this weekend, of course, by quite a big margin. Despite it being a short track, I think it'll be a 0.4 of a second gap to Lewis Hamilton, who will be alongside him on the front row. Lando Norris will be just behind in third. Oscar Piastri will be in fourth. Do have to say with Piastri, one thing, he has never raced, as far as I'm aware, around Zandvoort. So we have no data to know whether he's actually that quick here. Maybe this might be his best track. We don't know. So we'll find out this weekend, but I think he'll qualify in fourth. George Russell, I'm going in P5. Sergio Perez in P6. Perez has always been massively slow compared to his teammate and obviously home driver Verstappen around Zandvoort in 2021 and 2022. So that's why I'm going for a big gap between those two in terms of positions and lap time. And then Charles Leclerc, I think, will qualify in 7th. And the big reason why I think Ferrari will be so slow this weekend is because they're not bringing any upgrades this weekend. And I think that will cost them, not massively, but enough for them to lose out maybe a position here or there during the weekend. I mean, this was never going to be a really strong race for them anyway, so it's not like if they whacked the upgrades on that they're going to bring, maybe in a couple races time. Not like they would have been, on the front row or anything. So yeah, that's why I've gone with Leclerc in 7th. Fernando Alonso splitting the Ferraris in 8th. Carlos Sainz in 9th, and Lance Stroll, I am going in P10. The reason I got Stroll in the top 10, not in the P10, we have to remember last year at this race, Lance was very, very quick. He, in an Aston Martin car that was, probably the 6th quickest car in the second half of 2022 a lot of the time. Lance at this Grand Prix last year was super quick and was actually very unlucky because he had a car problem in Q3 and wasn't able to compete in Q3, where he probably would have qualified in 7th or 8th place. So he might be a bit of a wild card if he can tap back into whatever pace he had that weekend. But yeah, I think he'll be in the top 10. And I do think Aston Martin will be a bit better this weekend than what we've seen, in the last 2-3 races, at least in qualifying. And then for the race, Max Verstappen will, of course, win by a country mile. Lando Norris, I'm going to go in second, half a minute away from Verstappen. McLaren, as we have seen in the last 3 to 4 races, most of the time, McLaren have had a better race pace than Mercedes, and I think that will be the key between that little fight on Sunday, and that's why I think Lando Norris will finish in P2 ahead of Lewis Hamilton in P3. Sergio Perez will progress up to 4th, but because it's hard to overtake here and Perez's pace won't be that great, I don't see him finishing on the podium. Piastri, I'm going in 5th, just ahead of Russell in 6th. Alonso to finish in 7th, just ahead of Leclerc 8th. And then Carlos Sainz in 9th and Lance Stroll in P10. And definitely, as you can see, I think the Aston Martins and the Ferraris are both at risk because of the Red Bull and Max Verstappen pace. I think they're both at risk of getting lapped. And of course, these gaps that I've done is based on if we don't have any safety cars or red flags. So that's why I've done those gaps. Just how I think the pace difference will be between the teams during the course of the 72 laps. So yeah, that is my prediction for this weekend. Let me know, guys, in the live chat right now. Do you agree, disagree? And make sure, of course, to answer the poll currently running at the top of the live chat, where I've asked you guys, who will finish on the podium this weekend at the 2023 Dutch Grand Prix? Will it be Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari, or Aston Martin? I mean, technically, I have gone for both Mercedes and McLaren to be on the podium, but I would say McLaren because, again, they've probably got the second best race pace out of any team. They're probably the most likely out of those 4 teams to be on to be on the podium. But let me know whether you agree or disagree with that, and I'll make sure, of course, towards the end of the stream to go through that poll and read out the results. One thing I need to do quickly, guys, is quickly have a drink, because you might be able to hear my throat seizing up a bit. Really, because it's so warm, so that's why. So yeah, just give me a second, guys, and then I'll be back with you in a few moments. Right, so it should be better now. So yeah, let's get into the teams more in depth and talk about how their weekend, I think, will play out. We'll start with Red Bull. It's not going to be really that different of a weekend for them from what the normal is, which, as you can see on your screen right here, this is the normal for Red Bull. Winning races, and not just winning them, but winning them by a country mile. Max Verstappen will definitely get pole and win the race. I'd be very surprised if Max did not top every session. He could absolutely do that this weekend. And what's it called? Is it called the Grand Chelem? I think it is, where that's the, if you top every session, all the practice sessions, qualifying, Q1, Q2, Q3, and you lead every lap and get the fastest lap. I'm pretty sure that's what that is, or that record is. Sebastian Vettel, I think, did it a few times, say like 10 years ago or so. So yeah, I think Verstappen is pretty likely to do that this weekend. He will obliterate the rest of the field, so there's not much point talking about him. With Sergio Perez, if I can just find the picture of him, there you go. But yeah, with Perez, he's always struggled here. 2021, he got knocked out in Q1, and I think only made it back up to 8th place. So yeah, it wasn't a great performance that weekend. Last year, he qualified in 5th, and I think finished in, was it 5th? I can't remember exactly, but it wasn't a great weekend at all, and he was so slow compared to his teammates. So I would not expect a good performance this weekend from Perez. This track, he just doesn't go well at. And really, I think for Perez, what he's waiting for is the Italian Grand Prix next weekend, where we know he can always be very quick there. But this weekend, I'd be, I wouldn't say surprised if he wasn't on the podium. Let me rephrase that. Hold on. Yeah, with Perez, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe, my feelings towards him this, for this Grand Prix this weekend. If he doesn't finish on the podium, then yeah, there's part of me would be surprised, part of me would not, if that makes any sense. The part of me that would be surprised is because this car is so far clear of the rest of the field. But then there's part of me that wouldn't be surprised because, well, Sergio's never been quick here. So if that makes any sense, then yeah, that's basically my thoughts when it comes to Sergio Perez this weekend. He will be in there somewhere, but definitely not at the very front of the field. If Red Bull were to get a 1-2 out this weekend, I think that'd be a pretty special result. And it would be probably because of the performance of the car for them to secure a 1-2. I mean, we know Max is a super quick driver, and even if the car was basically equal with the Mercedes or McLaren cars, Max would probably still end up on pole and winning the race. But with Perez, yeah, he's going to need quite a bit of help to get on the podium. Whether that's, just amazing pace from the car, or even, the team may be helping with, an amazing strategy on the Sunday to try and get him massively up the field. But Red Bull, like I said, they're going to dominate this weekend. There's no point even discussing that. Of course, though, they are going for, I think, their record 14th win in a row. I'm pretty sure it is. this weekend. Of course, they've won all 12 races so far this season, and they obviously won the final race in 2022. And Max Verstappen has won, 7 races in a row now, is it? Or 8 races in a row, is it? Let me just, hold on. So Miami, Monaco, Spain, Canada, Austria. Yeah, 8 in a row. So, that's really what Red Bull's focus is at the minute. Of course, they're going to wrap up the championship. They could do the bare minimum in terms of putting forth effort, and they would still win the championship very, very easily. So, yeah, it's not exactly going to be difficult, wrapping that up pretty easily. But, like I said, Red Bull's main focus is now getting those records of, Max getting the most wins in a row secured. And if they can keep up this win record of that is, again, currently 13 in a row, that they want to make 14 in a row this weekend, that would be great as well. One thing I have noticed, though, that I need to quickly correct is in the chat, or not in the chat, on the bottom of the screen, I've accidentally put that Red Bull have won a record 12 consecutive races when it should be 13. They've won so many races in a row that I've lost count, essentially. So there you go. But yeah, Red Bull going to obliterate everyone as usual, and I don't see at the minute anyone having a chance of winning a race or even contending to win a race. Anyway, let's go on to Mercedes-Benz. Upgrades coming this weekend. From what I've heard recently from Toto Wolff, this upgrade is probably going to be the last one of the season. So you would hope it would be a big upgrade that would give them an extra, around, such a short track like this, probably an extra 10th. And then probably at longer tracks like Singapore that we're going to in a few weeks' time, an extra, say, 2.5, 3 tenths of a second. If they do bring an upgrade of that size, and it does make the car that much quicker, then that should be enough, not only to easily secure second in the championship, but also it should be enough for them to be regularly finishing on the podium for the rest of the season. As I said, because of how mental Red Bull are this season and how mentally quick they are, realistically, I don't think Mercedes are going to be able to win a race this season. So, yeah, that's unfortunate, but that's just the harsh reality of where they are compared to Red Bull. And, of course, they need to start properly focusing on next year's car, which will be fundamentally, in terms of the chassis, a completely different car compared to this one. This one, they've had to, obviously go in a different way with the car and go with this different design concept. But with the way the chassis was built, it was not originally designed for, that concept coming in when it did. So, yeah, next year's car, fingers crossed, will be quite a bit closer to Red Bull, at least to start the season in 2024. But yeah, Mercedes, I think they'll be strong this weekend. Lewis Hamilton has always been pretty quick here, and I think he'll be qualifying on the front row for Sunday, and his main fight will be with Lando Norris, of course, in the McLaren, who at the minute is in top form, and probably Sergio Perez in the Red Bull, purely because the Red Bull is just so bloody quick. So, yeah, Hamilton, watch out for him. He should have a pretty strong weekend. He's having such a great season as Hamilton. Even though at Spa, maybe it wasn't his best weekend overall, it was still a pretty good one, given that Mercedes were not as quick, really, I think, as they expected, and as I think most people expected them to be that weekend. So, yeah, Hamilton should be good. For George Russell, still, as we saw back in Spa, his form still isn't there. By the looks of it, he's had a pretty good summer break, so maybe he'll come back in a refreshed mood and he'll tap back into that form from last year where he was so consistently brilliant. That's what he really needs to do if he's going to try and get his form going for, say, next season, where if Mercedes, by some miracle, are able to fight Red Bull, then he can actually have a chance of winning races and maybe contending for the championship. But yeah, if you look at the last race at Spa, he was miles behind his teammate. I mean, in the end, let me actually look what the gap was in the end between Hamilton and Russell, because Hamilton actually pitted, I think, an extra time and still finished, 13 and a half seconds ahead of Russell, and Hamilton, again, pitted an extra time. So, in reality, Hamilton finished about half a minute ahead of his teammate, which around Spa, that's quite a big gap to have. So, Russell, this has to be, again, if he's going to really step things back up for a better 2024, he really needs to start this weekend getting some consistent good results going. But given what we've seen so far this season, I've gone with the prediction I've gone for him, 5th in qualifying and then 6th in the race. Not expecting anything that special from Russell, even though, of course, last year he did finish second in the race, which wasn't necessarily because of his own great performance. It was really just a bad strategy call for his teammate, which really assisted that. But we have to also remember with Russell, he did spin in qualifying, resulting in him starting from only 6th in that Grand Prix. So it wasn't a great weekend last year either, necessarily in terms of his actual performance, and especially compared to his teammate Hamilton when they were both on, similar tyres. So, yeah, most likely Russell will be lagging behind again. Hamilton will be the main man for Mercedes as normal. And, yeah, they should be, if Perez is, as far off Max as I think he will be, and Mercedes and McLaren are only, say, half a second or so away from Max's pace per lap, then Mercedes should be able to secure a podium, at least with Lewis Hamilton. Let's go on now to the Aston Martin team, who, of course, are engaged in a massive scrap at the minute for 3rd in the championship, which somehow they're still hanging on to that position after the Belgian Grand Prix, where going into that race weekend, I thought realistically there was no real chance of them going into the summer break still in 3rd, because Ferrari going into that race were looking quick. I mean, Leclerc was starting on pole. Carlos Sainz was, I think, quite high up on the grid as well compared to the Aston Martins, who I think were 9th and 10th. So for them to secure the result they did, even with Carlos Sainz having his retirement, was absolutely brilliant. And Aston Martin do have an upgrade coming for this weekend. We don't know how big of an upgrade it is. I have seen a picture online of possibly a slightly new front wing, but I'm hoping that's not the big upgrade or the biggest upgrade that they're bringing, because that'd be quite depressing, to be honest. But yeah, this weekend they'll be stronger than they were at Spa. Because Ferrari are not bringing anything and Aston Martin are, I think that should be enough, at least in the race, for Aston Martin to be quicker and probably beat Ferrari in the race overall, which, of course, will keep them in 3rd place. But given that McLaren are, also in that fight for 3rd in the championship, if McLaren do go and finish in 2nd and 5th, which would be a points haul of 28 points, compared to, 6 or 7 points that Aston Martin would score probably at highest. It's a 20-point gain. And if McLaren can keep that up for the rest of the season, and of course, McLaren will be catching very quickly, given that the gap is 93 points as it stands. So even with an upgrade for this weekend, I'm not expecting anything special. And if you are an Aston Martin fan or a Fernando Alonso fan, do not expect any special things, even with an upgrade this weekend. Of course, tomorrow we'll find out officially what their upgrades are. Let's hope it's, quite a bit more that I'm expecting, but I don't think it will be that massive, to be honest, because I think most likely Aston Martin are already concentrating on next year's car quite a bit more than, say, Ferrari and maybe McLaren are at this point compared to Aston Martin. So, yeah, not expecting anything special, but a decent result, let's say, compared to the last Grand Prix where we went to a high aero circuit, which was the Hungaroring, where Alonso and Stroll finished in the race 9th and 10th, which was pretty depressing for them. And the reason it was so depressing is because that wasn't, them finishing 9th and 10th. It wasn't because of bad luck or anything. That's because that's the pace they had. They were only good enough for P9 and P10, and we're actually pretty lucky that both Alpines retired, because they probably could have prevented at least Lance Stroll finishing where he did. But yeah, there you go. So we'll see how they do, but I just, want to give a warning. Don't expect anything special from them, because I think people might just get their hopes up quite a bit when they hear about upgrades for this team this weekend. Let's now go into the Scuderia. Ferrari team, of course. And yeah, this is going to be an off weekend for them, not just because of no upgrades, but this track layout just isn't it for them. There's not really, maybe you could say the first sector to a degree, but there's not really any part of the track that suits their car enough for them to be quick necessarily. So yeah, I don't think they've got any chance of being one of the top 3 teams. At best, they'll be quicker than Aston Martin by a tenth or so, but really Aston Martin is the team they're going to be fighting. Similar in Hungary, where them and Aston Martin were fighting, for 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th, really, in the back end of the points. That's how it's going to be here in Holland. So, yeah, it's going to be a depressing weekend for Ferrari, but if you are a Ferrari fan, don't get too down, because, of course, next weekend, it's Monza, the home race. Plus, Monza should be the track that suits their car the best out of any circuit on the calendar, because their car around high-speed circuits, as we saw at Spa, as we saw to a degree in Baku, and in other places, Austria, of course, has been really, really quick. So there will be quite a turnaround at the Italian Grand Prix. But for this weekend, not expecting anything really whatsoever. Leclerc should be quicker than Sainz. Leclerc was quicker than Sainz in the last 2 Grand Prix here in Holland. Leclerc, overall, his pace has been, given for how quick the car was in those particular Dutch Grand Prix weekends, his pace was absolutely fine. Carlos Sainz didn't have a great race last year, but did have damage, which caused that. But he didn't have a great race, I remember, in 2021, where he really suffered with bad tyre wear, which we know with him is quite an issue, where he can be suffering quite a bit more with poor tyres compared to his teammate. But yeah, I would be surprised if Ferrari scored 10 points this weekend. That would be, to be honest, quite a good return for them if they were to get 10 points, which, of course, that would have to be a 7th and 8th place finish. If Aston Martin are clearly behind them, then obviously that's a realistic result for them to get. But realistically, I don't think Aston Martin are going to be clearly behind them on pace. So, yeah, that's how I think Ferrari will be this weekend. 7th and 9th in qualifying, 8th and 9th in the race. I know it doesn't sound good, but again, next weekend at Monza, they probably, dare I say, will be on pole position. This time last year, compared to Red Bull, they weren't that quick either, and they ended up in pole position. So, I don't think it's out of the question. So, yeah, if you're a Ferrari fan, don't get too down because there will be hope just around the corner. And the last team we'll go on to before I come to some comments in the chat is the McLaren team. Spa was an alright weekend. Piastri, of course, finishing second in the sprint was the highlight of the weekend, really. Obviously was leading for 3 or 4 laps because they pitted a lap earlier for intermediate tyres in the sprint. The race was very messy. Piastri retired, of course, in the first lap. Lando came from the very back to finish in, 7th place in the end, and he did well to hang on to 7th because McLaren were not quick in that race. And obviously they had the wrong setup on. That's why they didn't have a great point-scoring race at Spa. This weekend, though, the car will be much better suited to the track layout. Plus, I mean, the chances of you getting the setup wrong around here is very small because it's not like with Spa, half the track is very long acceleration zones, and then you've got the middle sector, which is all about downforce. So it is easy at Spa at times to get the setup wrong because, obviously, depending on the weather as well, you might decide to go a bit too far in one direction. But here at Zandvoort, there's no real risk of that because even if it does rain, of course, the car, the way it will be set up in the dry, it will still be working just fine in the wet as well. So yeah, McLaren, I expect to be very quick. Third quickest, I think, in qualifying, and then second quickest in the race. Lando Norris here last year was very, very good. 7th in qualifying, and I think finished in the top 6, or maybe even the top 7 in the race as well. So yeah, it was a great performance from Lando. And the McLaren car overall looked really quick here last year. And not everything about the current McLaren car is different necessarily to that McLaren car last year. So yeah, this is definitely more so a suiting track for the McLaren team. Lando Norris theoretically should be ahead of Oscar this weekend on pace. I mean, Lando's been ahead of Oscar on pace almost every weekend of the season so far, but especially given, as I said earlier with Oscar, given that he's never raced around here, we have no idea what his actual performance will be around this circuit. So yeah, I have no idea really what to say about Piastri. So I predicted him, to finish where I have based on really how close it's been to Lando so far this season. But for Lando Norris, again, he'll be the main man for McLaren. 3rd in qualifying, 2nd in the race it should be. The only thing I am looking out for with McLaren of interest that could really change up their weekend is, of course, they are bringing upgrades as well. I'm just interested, though, to see how big will those upgrades be. Because, of course, now they've got the wind tunnel, I think new simulator, all of that basically, or pretty much all online now. They are talking quite a bit about focusing on next year's car, but given they do have a good chance of finishing 3rd in the championship, they're at a bit of a dilemma right now where, do they focus on next year's car and maybe build a car that is race winning, title contending, or do they, maybe dedicate a bit more time to this year's car, try and secure, 3rd in the championship, a position they haven't finished in the constructors since 2020. And of course, in 2020, that was the only year they have finished in the top 3 of the championship since, 2012. So there is still an incentive for this season for McLaren to, keep pushing with development. So it'll be interesting to see how big their upgrade is this weekend and whether the upgrade does give them, an extra 0.2 of a second or so. It'll be very interesting to see how that all plays out for the McLaren team. But yeah, they're going to be super quick. They'll be the quickest team in the race, except for Red Bull, of course. And watch out, of course, for the superstar himself, Lando Norris. But before, guys, I go on to the rest of the field, I want to come to you guys now in the live chat. So make sure to let me know right now in the live chat, guys, what do you think of the teams coming into this weekend? And how do you think they'll all get on as well for the drivers? How do you think they'll all get on as well? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And as well, of course, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. And also, make sure to smash a like button. You obviously help support the channel. We're currently on 16 likes. Let's try and get up to 25 if we can by the end of the stream. That'd be fantastic. And quickly, before I read your comments, just an update as to the next two live streams on the channel. So tomorrow night I'll be live at 6:30 PM UK time for the qualifying preview for the Dutch Grand Prix. And then on Saturday, I'll be back, obviously, doing my watch-alongs with a Practice 3 watch-along, F2 Sprint Race watch-along, and then qualifying watch-along. We'll be live from 10:15 AM UK time, firstly for Practice 3, then the F2 Sprint Race, and then qualifying, of course, all the way until 3:30 PM. So make sure to join me for that mammoth stream on Saturday. And then on Sunday, I'll be live, of course, for the race preview and watch along from 12 PM UK time, 2 hours before the race starts until 4 PM UK time, something like that. So again, make sure to join me for all of that content. But yeah, let's read out some comments in the chat. It's not too many, so I'll just read out the best ones I can find. Hello to you all, by the way. Sparky Pizzas Aston got big upgrade this weekend. Again, we don't know that for sure, so let's let's hold off on that because we don't know for sure, and I don't want to jump the gun. Angel 10 says, absolutely hate this track when playing F1 on PlayStation. Difficult with just a controller. Yeah, I've noticed because I play the F1 game on the controller, it is quite awkward at times, especially when you're going through, I think, turn 7, turn 8. Get a bit awkward. But, yeah, it's not one of my favourite tracks on the game, at least. Dathan Cooper says, I don't think Stroll makes Q3. Darth Lord Raven. Hey, Chazza, hey, everyone. Glad to be back from the summer break. Yep, great to be back. And yeah, great to see all of you guys, of course. And MK says, Max has already won this. He is mega on this track. Only a carb problem can stop him. True. Absolutely true. And to be honest, with how the F1 cars are nowadays, even if he had a car problem, even if he had a car problem, if it was, a car problem that could be maybe fixed on the steering wheel, like we see the drivers sometimes doing a Control-Alt-Delete with the software, he probably would still win the race, even if it cost him like 40 to 50 seconds. He'd probably still come back and win the race somehow. That's how far ahead him and Red Bull as a combination are. And it's truly terrifying how good they are right now. One of the best driver team combinations we have ever seen in Formula 1. Max Verstappen and Red Bull. And I know you may say that's too early to say, given the other driver team combinations we've seen, dominate Formula 1, such as Hamilton and Mercedes, Schumacher and Ferrari, Senna and McLaren, Clark and Lotus. But let's be honest, guys, as much as I'm hoping next year Max and Red Bull can actually have some competition from Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari for the championship, realistically, Red Bull are going to win next year's championship and the championship in 2025 as well. So, I mean, the chances are not really that high for them being stopped. And it's not because Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren are incapable, but Red Bull have, this big head start on those teams, plus such a formidable, they're such a formidable team to go up against because they don't make any mistakes. They are as close to perfect with their performance trackside as you can get. So, yeah. Anyway, let's go through the rest of the teams and get to the end of this stream. So we'll go now on to Alpine. Not going to spend too much time on Alpine. Of course, after Spa, which was quite a hilarious weekend for them, in a bad way, of course. That's why it would be hilarious for them. Otmar Safnauer obviously being fired. Alan Permain, their sporting director, being let go as well and being basically told to fuck off during the weekend. And Otmar Safnauer actually left the team before the race started. So, yeah, it was quite such a weird weekend from Alpine, because even despite all of that stuff going on off the track, they ended up getting a pretty good result after the race. Esteban Ocon finishing in 8th place was one of the drivers of the day, and I certainly did not expect a points finish from them. So, yeah, just it's just so amazing to me, even though I've never rated Alpine as a team. It's just so amazing to me how their season has gone, because at the start of the year there was optimism. Then obviously their season peaked in Monaco, where the reason they finished on the podium, their pace was genuine. It wasn't just pure luck or anything like that. But then they've just absolutely dropped off a cliff, not just in terms of pace, but the team's actual performance has just completely dropped off. It's like, they got the podium, they were content with that, and they just don't. I'm not going to say that they don't care, but with the way they're performing, it's like, it does feel like that. But I'm sure that they do care, and they're trying their best to get the best result they can, but I just don't get why after that podium in Monaco, there's been such a drop-off. Because you would think after that podium, there'd be such a motivation in the team. Keep developing, keep improving, because of how much closer they were getting to being, right at the front. But then, upgrade-wise, they haven't brought really any upgrades since then. Just, little alterations to the front wing. And then, that's resulted in a loss of performance on track, and then off track has been a circus, and that's why they're in the position that they're in now. And Alpine come into this weekend with not really any hope at all, because with the way Formula 1 is right now, with the top 5 teams being pretty clear, Red Bull, Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari, Aston Martin, you'd have to say overall for the pecking order, that's what it's been for the last few races. Alpine's chances of finishing in the points is 10-15% at most. And I know Ocon obviously had a great race at Spa, but obviously Piastri and Sainz not finishing the race massively helped in him, securing that result. And as well, what was it? Who else had a not so great race that allowed Ocon to, get into the points? Albon to a certain extent, because Albon was running in the top 10 as well. So, yeah, Ocon, his performance, again, was very good. That overtake he did on Yuki Tsunoda was absolutely fantastic. But I feel as though the result kind of papers over the cracks that are really showing at Alpine, and have been showing, quite a lot in the last couple months. So, yeah, this weekend, I don't think they've really got a chance of points. I don't even think they're the quickest team outside of the top 5 this weekend. I think that'll be the Alfa Romeo team, who just go better at higher aero circuits. Alpine, I think, are just desperate for the season to end, because they can't finish any higher than 6th, because everyone ahead of them in the championship is way too quick for them. And then everyone below them, Williams, Haas, Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri, are too far away on points and are probably too slow to be able to catch them. Because, I mean, for Williams, it's 46 points, I think, the gap between Williams and Alpine, which realistically, that gap is not going to come down. So, yeah, Alpine will finish in 6th. And like I said, I think they're just desperate for the season to end. And for, the new permanent team principal to, take charge for next year and see if we can turn this team around. Most likely he won't. For Williams, Spa was a missed opportunity, I feel. They definitely had the performance in the dry to secure some points, but it just never happened. In the race, it was at one point looking very good. Alex Albon was up to, I think, 6th or 7th place, but then Williams did start to suffer with a loss of performance, probably mainly down to the Williams burning out its tyres too quickly. And in the end, Albon and Sargent finished quite far away from finishing in the points, which was a shame. But the pace was there quite a bit of the time, so there was an opportunity. They just didn't quite grasp it. And of course, the weekend being as wet as it was up until the race on the Sunday did not help, because if it was a dry weekend, I'm pretty sure they would have qualified in the top 10 rather than have their cars start, way too far back on the grid. This weekend, given the track layout, I don't think they've got a chance of points. Alex Albon will probably get into Q2, but other than that, I don't see Williams doing anything special this weekend. They'd need to hope for a few retirements and a safety car at the right time for them to maybe end up nicking a point. And they got to hope for them that the next team I'm going to go on to, Haas F1, that their new upgrade that's supposed to fix their biggest weakness, which is poor tyre management, they better hope that doesn't work, because if it does, Haas might just clinch 7th place this season in the Constructors' Championship. Haas, in qualifying this season, as we've talked about a lot of the time, have looked amazing, but then in the race, they just cannot deliver on it whatsoever, because they burn their tyres out at twice the rate that all the other teams do. And that's why they've rarely delivered on the great performance we've seen on a Saturday. If they had normal levels of tyre wear, like almost all the other teams have, then Haas would be not only comfortably in P7 in the championship, they would probably be in a position to fight with Alpine for 6th, because Haas have actually been consistently, in the top 10, I think quite a bit more than Alpine have. With Alpine, they've been in the top 10 quite a few times, but it's been not, consistently. There's been races where they've been outside, a couple races, then, there'll be a race where they get into the top 10, then a couple races where they go out. With Haas, it's been a lot more consistent, but again, that race pace has just been an issue for them. We will see whether the upgrade to the suspension or the wheel, I can't remember exactly what it is, whether it will actually improve the performance on Sunday. If it does, and it gets their performance to the level of what their qualifying performance is like relative to their competitors, then it's looking great for the rest of the season. But if they can't, then the season's basically over, because no matter how quick they are on a Saturday, they will never deliver a point on the Sunday. That's just the realistic view of the situation at the moment, until, of course, we see that they actually are going to fix that particular issue. And now we'll go on to the final couple teams. Alfa Romeo, again, I think will be the dark horse this weekend. They were very strong in Hungary, the last high aero track we went to. Of course, Zhou was incredibly quick, qualifying in P5, and was actually decently quick at this Grand Prix last year, where he outqualified his teammate Valtteri Bottas. So maybe the Chinese driver will produce another good performance. He really needs to if he's going to really secure his Formula One future, because of course the team next year becomes officially Sauber F1, which is what they basically are now. And, with Teo Pourchaire leading the F2 championship with 3 race weekends to go. Those 3 race weekends being this weekend at Zandvoort, next weekend at Monza, and then final race weekend in F2 is in Abu Dhabi at the end of November. Ridiculous, I have to say, by the break in between the penultimate and the final round of the championship in F2. But yeah, if Teo can pull off, the championship, then if Zhou has a poor second half of the season, that really will affect his chances of remaining on the grid. So he really does need, if he can, if the pace is there and his confidence is not too shook after what happened back in Hungary, if he can get into the top 10 and, not do what he did last time, which is, crash out a couple people at the start and have a horrific start as well, then maybe he could do enough to secure his Formula 1 future. So we will see. But yeah, Alfa Romeo, watch out for them, because at higher aero tracks, as we've seen all season long, they have been more competitive. And so have our final team, AlphaTauri. They normally are more competitive at the higher downforce circuits. We saw in Hungary, they're actually weren't too bad, their pace in the midfield compared to Alfa Romeo, Haas, and even, they weren't that far away from Aston Martin, really, especially when you consider their quickest driver in qualifying that weekend was Daniel Ricciardo. And of course, that was his first weekend back in Formula 1. So, yeah, AlphaTauri should have a decent weekend. Nothing special. I doubt they'll finish in the points, but it should be decent for them. Ricciardo's had a good return. Not a great return necessarily. I mean, it's too early really to say whether it's been great from Ricciardo or not good enough or whatever, because it's only been, 2 races back for the Australian. But it's looked a decent so far for Ricciardo. And for this weekend, I've got to admit, I hope he can put in a good performance and, show strong pace compared to his teammate. But we've not really seen enough from Ricciardo previously at this track to know that he's actually going to be that competitive. Last year here at Zandvoort, he was horrendous compared to his teammate Lando Norris. I think Ricciardo was knocked out in Q1 and ended up finishing 17th or 18th, and Lando was up in 7th or 6th. Just an incredible difference between the two drivers. And then with Yuki Tsunoda, can't remember with Tsunoda him ever really having great pace around here. He's had decent pace at times around here, but nothing eye-catching. So, yeah, we will see how the team get on. It should be a bit stronger in the dry than we've seen other tracks this weekend or this season. But yeah, they will be decent, not spectacular, not great, but they will have a decent weekend, given that they are the worst team on the grid. But those guys are all of the teams going into this weekend's 2023 Dutch Grand Prix. Simon Cragland, let me just answer a couple comments from him in the live chat. Asks, do you agree with me that Logan should be dropped if his current performance doesn't improve? If so, do you agree with me that they should get Yuki or Mick? Mick is most likely, obviously. If Logan keeps up his current performance level, then yeah, for next year he should not be on the grid, because I like Alex Albon. Albon has definitely improved on where he was with his performance, back in 2019 or 2020. But Alex Albon is not a top Formula 1 driver. So for Logan to be, on average, half a second or 0.6 of a second slower than Alex Albon is a poor performance. And it's not good enough for Formula 1. He should be, even for his rookie year, he should be on average at, say, 0.3 of a second slower than Alex, which would be half of the gap that it is currently on average at the minute, which again is 0.6 of a second between the two drivers. So yeah, I agree. He should lose his seat if the performances continue. Whether he will lose his seat, of course, who knows? We do have to remember, of course, the team is owned by an American company, so not necessarily super likely they will get rid of him. But if they do, which I think if he keeps up these level of performances, which it would be the right decision, clearly. And I know, I've seen people online say, he's been decent, or, oh, well, it's his rookie year. It's, such stupid comments, really, I think. I mean, of course, they're free to have that opinion, but for me, it's just so stupid, because just because it's your rookie year does not mean you have the right to be absolutely terrible. I mean, I think having that excuse is all right if you're coming into Formula One and you say a certain thing is expected of you if you're driving a certain type of car, and maybe you're not quite hitting the heights that are expected often enough. Then you could give that excuse of, well, it's their rookie year, let's give them time. I mean, at times you could say that, for example, with Lando Norris in his debut year. I mean, in qualifying, Lando was always super quick, but in the races, Lando was not necessarily always achieving, what was possible in that car, and hadn't quite, had got it together at that point. But it was his rookie year, and he was, I think, still 19 years old. With Logan, given that Alex Albon has been regularly in between the positions of 10th and 13th, or 10th and 14th this season, Logan should be, not all of the time, but half of the time, occupying that part of the field. When this season, I can only think of 2, maybe 3 races where he's been around those positions, which was like Bahrain, Austria, and maybe Silverstone. Just not good enough. And again, the pace difference between the two, just not good enough. It not Formula One standard. And if they were to replace him, as I said with my driver lineup analysis for 2024, which I did a couple of weeks ago, I believe they should look at Mick Schumacher, because I think Mick would probably, because of his, one, better experience, and also I do think Mick is a better driver than Logan. We have to remember, of course, Mick won the F3 Euro Championship in 2019, and won the F2 title. He won the F3 Euro, or Euro F3 title in 2018, actually, not 2019. And then he won the F2 Championship in 2020. We have to remember that, of course, with him. But as well, in his, last year at Haas, I mean, yeah, his pace wasn't great, but I think the biggest problem with Mick was the lack of consistency. Because there were actually race weekends where Mick was just as quick, if not quicker, than Kevin Magnussen. So, the potential is there with Mick, when with Logan, we have seen no evidence that there is potential there, because he's never been anywhere near close to his teammate. So, yeah, I think Mick Schumacher would be a good option. Yuki Tsunoda is never going to go to Williams because he's part of the Red Bull Driver Academy, and he would be infinitely better off at AlphaTauri than he would Williams. And, of course, he's hoping for a Red Bull seat one day. And Simon Cracklin asking, what do you make of Hülkenberg and Magnussen staying at Haas? As I said in that stream, I think looking at who the options are at the minute, other than Magnussen, I think that's what they had to do, was keep the two drivers, because the only options out there really are Oliver Behrman, you've got, who's part of the Ferrari Driver Academy, but he's in his first year of F2 at the minute, and I think needs another year in Formula 2 because he's not quite consistent enough yet, and I do feel as though he can still improve before he gets to Formula 1. So, yeah, I would I'd wait, say, until 2025 for bringing Oliver Behrman onto the grid. I've heard talk of Zhou Guanyu, but I don't think Zhou is a step up whatsoever on Magnussen. At best, it's just a sideways move for the Haas team. So yeah, I think it's the right decision. Plus, Magnussen has a great relationship with the team, which obviously helps. Simon's saying, I think Paul Chair should get the chance at Sauber if he wins the F2. Yeah, absolutely. I think I've said this, countless times this season. If Teo wins Formula 2, he should be on the grid. End of story. Even if he just misses out, I think there's still an argument to be had that he deserves to be on the grid ahead of Zhou. But if he wins F2, I don't care what anyone says. He 100% deserves to be on the grid. And people may compare, what he's done in F2 to Zhou, which is fine. But people have to remember, Zhou Guanyu, he entered Formula 1 when he was, 23, I think? Or was he 22? I can't remember exactly. 22 or 23. Teo only turned 20, a week ago. So all of what he's done in F2, up until this point, he was a teenager. When with Zhou, when he was in F2, he was, in his early 20s. If that does not show you the levels to, from Teo Pourchaire to Zhou Guanyu, given that Teo has less experience, and I don't really know what to tell you. And the last comment I'll read out quickly is from McLaren F1 Race. It says Oscar is doing well for a rookie. Lando to keep him in check for the number one driver. Absolutely. And yeah, Oscar having a brilliant debut season. And I think really putting a marker down for his Formula 1 career. And he's always going to be a very, what do you call it? Not very formidable, but definitely formidable driver in Formula 1. And I would say he is another driver we can now add to that tier of top drivers. Not necessarily on the level of Verstappen, Hamilton, Alonso, but I think definitely you could put him on the same level as, Russell, Norris, Leclerc, drivers like that. I think I'd definitely put him on that level. Again, been an very impressive debut season. But anyway, that's it for the stream, guys. Thank you very much for coming along. Again, a reminder of the next two live streams. Tomorrow I'll be live at 6:30 PM UK time for the Dutch Grand Prix qualifying preview. Then on Saturday, live from 10:15 AM UK time for the Practice 3 watch-along. Then the F2 Sprint Race watch-along. Very important, by the way, the F2 Sprint Race, given that it is the third to last sprint race of the season in F2. And, of course, the main event of Saturday, the qualifying watch-along. Probably the main event of the weekend, given this particular circuit. And yeah, live from 10:15 in the morning until 3:30 PM in the afternoon. Make sure to join me for that mammoth stream and the Sunday stream as well, covering the race with a race preview and watch-along. And yeah, make sure to come along to all of that. Before you go, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Smash the like button, obviously, to help the channel out. It'd be great if you could do that. And make sure as well, if you can, to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5. Keep up with the content on this channel. And don't forget as well to join my Discord server, link below in the description, if you want to join our growing community. But guys, until my qualifying preview tomorrow, where we're going to go through all of the practice 2 data to see how the teams are looking, how their pace is looking so far this weekend, and go through the official list of upgrades. And actually, one thing before I go quickly, sorry to tease you guys. One thing I did want to quickly get into before I went is the weather, which I was meaning to get onto, but I just never remembered in time. So the weather forecast for Zandvoort is dry tomorrow, maybe some rain in the morning, but it'll be very early in the morning. I don't think it's going to affect practice 1 or practice 2. Saturday looks like we're going to have a wet day, wet practice 3 probably, and most probably a wet qualifying, so that should make it exciting. And then Sunday looks like it's probably going to be dry, so it should be a mostly dry weekend, with Saturday being the most wet of all of the days. So make sure, like I said, tomorrow, the qualifying preview, to join me for looking through all of the practice 2 data to see who is looking quick and who isn't, and to see who officially has brought what upgrades. And until tomorrow's qualifying preview at 6:30 PM UK time, guys, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.